Hello everybody, I have been trying to bring you this video for a minute, but I haven't been able to. The number one thing that has been stopping me is me and my own procrastination, so sorry about that, but here it is. This video today is about gut feelings by Gerd Gigerenzer. He is a fellow at the Max Planck Institute. The Max Planck Institute is an institute for very, very smart people. He studies risk assessment and probability, things like this. So basically, for all of that, all of this risk assessment, what he is championing is the idea of trusting your gut, trusting simple heuristics over complex models. We kind of went into this briefly in the New Morality video with Jonathan Haidt and that book, where he talks about how valuable our gut instincts are because they have been tested over millions of years of survival. So just because we don't understand them in here, it doesn't mean that our body and our instincts aren't correct. Oftentimes, our body and our instincts, our gut feelings, are more correct than these complex models. Our gut instincts are better able to predict the future and make predictive decisions more so, much more so than these complex models, these complex computer models. Now, over the past few years, we have seen how the world has gotten into trouble trusting complex computer models. And we go into that in this video, how the experts can know so much that they handicap themselves. Now, instincts, gut instincts, intuition has kind of gotten a bad label recently because people consider it hippy-dippy, they consider it psychobabble or whatever. People have instead, especially academia, has instead decided to trust logic and reason. And of course, logic and reason are fantastic. Traditional probability, math, all pure math, that is fantastic and it's very helpful. However, they don't make such great predictions because they assume that we live in a perfect world where all of the variables can be accounted for. Unfortunately, where is this world? Not here. This is not a perfect world. This is a very complex world, and we don't even know what the variables are half the time. So we just have to trust our best instinct because it is so complex. Now, these computer models, they are fantastic in hindsight. You put in all the information once you know all the information, and then you go back in hindsight and you explain what happened. But of course we know, hindsight is 2020. We're in the here and now, and we need to make predictions about our future for our best interests. And the best way to do that is trusting our gut, using heuristics. What are heuristics? Heuristics are basically thinky tools. They're brain shortcuts that we can use to make simple decisions quickly. Now, thinky tool is probably not the best definition. I'm assuming you are not happy with the definition thinky tool. However, it works. And the actual definition is very long and complex. And why would you need to know it? I will tell you it right now, but you're probably going to think thinky tool. So you're welcome. But here's the actual definition. A heuristic or heuristic technique is any approach to problem solving or self-discovery that employs a practical method that is not guaranteed to be optimal, perfect, or rational, but is nevertheless sufficient for reaching an immediate short-term goal or approximation. Where finding an optimal solution is impossible or impractical, heuristic methods can be used to speed up the process of finding a satisfactory solution, and so forth and so on. It's a quick shortcut, quick thinky tool that you can use to help you make a decision fast. A quick decision, because that's what we are faced with in life. And that's where we have the edge over the AI, because they are 100% logic and reason, and they can't factor in things that have not been programmed into them. So this is where humans have the edge, huh? Might win out over Skynet after all. Certainly winning out over these self-driving cars because they don't have heuristics. They're 110% logic and reason. So here we go. Not to beat a dead horse. Professor Gigerenzer wants us to understand that our world is not perfect. It's not like the lottery. It's not like going to Vegas. Those things you can predict because you know the rules of the game. We don't even know the rules of the game in the real world. They keep changing. We see that. We've seen that a lot over the past few years. The rules of the game keep changing, and therefore we have to make quick decisions. Heuristics. What are some heuristics? Well, the gaze heuristic. The gaze heuristic, if you play baseball, you'll know this. Keep your eye on the ball. Just keep your eye on the ball. Now, some coaches want to make it more complex. They want to do all of this Newtonian physics to figure out where the ball is going to fall, how the best players figure out where the ball is going to be. You know how they do that? They keep their eye on it. That's the gaze heuristic. Keep your eye on the ball. And keeping your eye on the ball, the gaze heuristic is more predictive and will help you actually catch the ball more so than someone who spent all of this time and extra mental energy trying to calculate where the ball is going to fall. Do you really need to know the formula to calculate that, or do you need to know how to catch it in your hand? Another simple heuristic, take the best. That a single good reason for something is often correct. If you're in sales, you may be familiar with the hiatus heuristic, which is if a customer hasn't bought in 9 months, that's probably an inactive customer and it's not worth the time to try to pursue them. Now, these are simple one-step devices that people can use to make decisions. And they do a better job at predicting than these complex computer models. As good, if not better, more often better. Now, what is better? Better is you can predict 60% of the time, maybe 65% of the time. It's not 100% of the time. Nothing is 100% of the time because we live in an unpredictable and chaotic world. What are you going to do? Move worlds? Professor Geigerenzer would like to remind us all the time that we live in an uncertain world, uncertainty. And so we have to use other knowledge that might not be related to the problem at hand to guess the best solution. Now, this actually, he mentioned a study about how people, okay, here is the study. And this has been taken in 2 different ways. So hear me out. Where is this? I should have taken it out. Jeez. So here is a famous study, and it is about the individual's assessment of probability. You may have heard this before. They asked many people, what is more likely? That Linda is a bank teller. Or 2, that Linda is a bank teller and active in the feminist movement. More people chose the second than the first. Why is that? According to the researchers, Nobel laureate Mr. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, this is an illogical answer because, of course, it is more likely that she is a bank teller than she is a bank teller and also active in the feminist movement because the second can't be larger than the first, mathematically speaking, in probability. However, Geigerenzer argues that we have to make inferences because in our life, we know that we don't have all of the information. So we have to go out and try to infer, try to guess what is behind the scenes. And that's how we make our best decisions for us. So it's not that people do not understand probability. It's that probability doesn't take into account that we live in a complex world that a lot is going on in, a lot that we just can't account for because we're not aware of all the information. I thought that was interesting because that study is often pointed to explain how people are so illogical. But Geigerenzer is saying, actually, that proves that we just have a different kind of logic, a social logic that makes sense when you're dealing with our group structure. And of course, hard math doesn't necessarily have to deal with our group structure. Now you might say, Maya, but probability is math, and math is math, and it is a language of the universe. Well, this is correct. Math is the language of the universe. However, when we're dealing in social organizations, things are not logical. People do not behave logically. And therefore, we have to guess. We need to take social cues. We have to try to find more information than is given to us. So yes, probability is very helpful. Probability is especially helpful if you are at a casino or whatever. However, if you're playing poker, you do need to use inferences. You do know that there is an uncertainty. It's not just what the cards are, it's how people play them. And so we try to get clues. We try to pick up on social clues on these people's tells. Just because they have a certain deck of cards and you have a different deck of cards and your deck of cards is better doesn't mean you're going to win the game. Geigerenzer suspects that this is one of the reasons why AI is so dumb. You know, I've been fighting AI this whole time. AI may be winning. The algorithm may be winning for now. However, he explains that's why it is essentially dumb, because it can't read between the lines. It can't make these inferences. And AI, being unable to read between the lines, being unable to make these inferences, is actually not making as good of choices as people who are, as us. We're able to read between the lines, and so we make better choices. Now, this is the thing about experts that Geigerenzer points out many, many times in this, but he actually has studies to back it up. And he says, look, people who know only a little bit about a subject, maybe half of what there is to know about a subject, make better predictions than these experts. Why is that? Because people who know a little know the important things, and people who know a lot, these experts, know a lot of superfluous things. They're less predictive than simple gut instincts. And what do we mean by that? 65% versus like 40%, etc. Now, if you're into finance, you probably are familiar with this through how the market operates. A lot of these hedge fund managers do not do better than the market alone. So people who just invest their money in the market, in a fund that covers the market, the average of the market, the average growth of the market, and distributes it across, they actually do better than these experts who know a lot about stocks. They've researched it and researched and researched it, but they are not able to actually beat the market. How many hedge funds, how many of these managed funds are actually able to beat the market? When you really look at it, it is not very many. Only a few, really. So you're better off just buying a fund and letting it ride with the average of the entire market than trusting an expert. Now, why should you believe that? Well, this expert says so. So, of course. Well, he's done studies. He did this one study that's really interesting. He put it in the book. He said that people in America, he said that. He did a study where he asked American students which city is bigger, Detroit or Milwaukee. Well, we're aware of both of those cities. So it's kind of hard. When I thought about it, I was like, Detroit or Milwaukee? I don't know. But he asked German students which city is larger, Detroit or Milwaukee, and they guessed Detroit. They guessed correctly. He asked Japanese students the same thing, and they guessed Detroit. It was correct because they only knew a little bit about America. They didn't know all the ins and outs of our industrial Midwest. They don't know these things. They just know, I've heard of Detroit. Okay, cool. And they were correct. Whereas people who knew too much about America were incorrect, more likely to be incorrect. Nothing is 100%. I'm not saying dismiss the experts, nor is Professor Geigerenzer. I don't think he's saying dismiss the experts. I think he's saying educate the experts, because he even said that a lot of doctors can't understand the statistics in medical papers. So doctors can't even understand the stats in the papers of their own profession. Actually, Professor Geigerenzer pointed out in this talk is actually from 2018, so before all of this happened. He pointed out that when Google tried to predict the spread of the flu, they couldn't, because the algorithms could not tell whether someone was Googling because they were sick or because they were curious. So a simple rule of thumb, 3 simple numbers, were better able at predicting the spread of the flu than all of Google, all of the knowledge behind Google. Now, as he pointed out, not me, there's a lot of money in healthcare. So they wanted to get in on this predictive modeling for healthcare, and it didn't work then. So did it work with COVID? We'll have to see. But so I'll just link that at the bottom, where he advocates for a heuristics revolution, like we had a probability revolution. He says, okay, let's have a heuristics revolution too, because we know more than we can put in a formula. In fact, for complex models like what we deal with in the real world on the day-to-day, simple heuristics are more predictive than these complex models. Whereas for simple solutions, such as what's the card that's going to come out in blackjack or whatever. Then complex models work better. But unless you're in a casino playing blackjack all the time, that's not what you're looking for, is it? So he advocates for a heuristics revolution like we had a probability revolution. I think both of these things should coexist, because yes, trust our gut, but we also have to calibrate our gut. A lot of you may be familiar with this from Bayesian theory, the Bayesian theorem, which is basically there is conditional probability. That's very similar. Just to explain conditional probability real quick, conditional probability is the chances that an event will happen given that another event has already occurred. So what are the chances somebody needs bail? Well, that depends a lot on if they've been arrested first. See, the probability is conditional. I'm not an expert in Bayesian probability, but over the past 40, 50 years or so in academia, and of course, academia has spread out over the public, now raw probability has become more popular, logic and reason has become more popular, and here we are, 2022. We know logic and reason has its limits. I don't want to go into what is physical reality versus what is social reality. Once you get into social reality, you're going for chaos. There's too many variables to even keep in mind. A lot of us who have been trying to figure out what's been going on these past few years have been looking at all these variables and being like, well, this has to go here, and then this affects this and this and this and this. And your mind looks like a conspiracy board when really you just have to have a simple heuristic to help you take the best step, make the best decision for yourself. Let the academics go back and figure out what really happened later on. But we're in the here and now. We're on the ground. Now, a quick note about familiarity. Just because we're familiar with something doesn't mean that that is correct. That instinct can be hijacked by advertising. And we're going to go into that in the conditioning video, the behaviorism video, how we are being conditioned by messages, slogans, etc. And that sort of part of our monkey brain that makes the quick decisions has been taken over by brands and advertising and whatsoever. But we know this, so now we can adjust our gut to account for advertising. Even still, if we hear of a brand, we hear of a product, if we've heard of it, we assume that the cream rises to the top. And if it doesn't, then we would have heard something very bad about that brand. So if a brand has been out for 50 years or so, we can trust that it's a good brand. Is that true? Is that not true? Is that just repeated messaging? Of course, advertisers know about all of this. They know how we make decisions, how we make gut choices. And they kind of hijack that gut decision. But Professor Geigerenzer is basically saying, calibrate your gut. It's your best tool. Some important takeaways from this book, this line of thinking that Professor Geigerenzer has so kindly pointed out with his research and his studies, et cetera, that as far as dealing with other people, tit for tat is the best way to deal with other people. If they're nice to you, be nice to them. If they're rude to you, be rude to them. That's it. It's super simple. Malcolm X said a similar thing. I treat someone how they treat me. Very simple. He did all of the studies, called all the people into his office and asked them this, this, and that. Guess what? Tit for tat works the best. Who else is tit for tat in 2022? Okay, maybe 2020, I was a lot nicer. 2022, you're getting what you're given, okay? That's all there is to it. Another big takeaway is trust your gut, but your gut can be hijacked. So keep that in mind. Your first instinct is usually your best. They did a lot of studies on this. And the first thing that you decide, whatever your gut instinct is usually the best instinct. Benjamin Franklin had this sort of moral calculus. He was telling his nephew couldn't decide who to marry. So he told his nephew, okay, make a list of both girls and put down what's good about both girls underneath this, and then decide who you want to marry from there. I'm not sure if the logic to this is that list doesn't matter. And by the time you finish that list, you're going to have someone you secretly hoped got the best answer, whether they did or not. Or if he was really so unfeeling that he thought his nephew would find a wife based on this list. It doesn't work that way. You don't find your spouse based on, I want these qualities and that quality. You see a person and something about them makes you love them or puts you off to them. So trust whatever that is most of the time. Another big takeaway is that we are not working on a level playing field. This is not the lottery. This is not a casino. There are many variables that we are not aware of, many games being played on us at any given time. So keep that in mind. We can't just use probability theory. We can use it in conjunction with heuristics, but probability on its own is not going to make the best prediction. We're looking out for prediction. Another big takeaway is that more information is not always better. It does not always help us make better predictions. Sometimes that is just extra information that is going to get in our way. Most importantly, things are not 100%. We can't make 100% predictions into the future. It's just not possible. There's too much going on. There's too many balls in the air. So basically, we can just do our best. And these heuristics, these simple thinking tools, help us make better predictions than more complicated models. Now, here's the last thing I want to point out. This is very important about Professor Geigerenzer. He tries to warn us about credit scores. Not social credit scores, just regular credit scores, which were already a problem in 2018. That's another video. We'll talk about it later. He says these credit scores, they're not transparent. We don't know what information they're using to make their decision. And they're using a lot of information that is just not relevant. Especially, have you ever tried to get an apartment and you put in the application and it says, well, no, your credit isn't good enough, but you've never not paid rent? This is what they should be looking out for. Has this person ever paid rent? That's why a reference from a landlord means a lot more than whatever this credit score is. So these algorithms that are being used to judge us, our credit score, is not transparent. We don't know what they're making their decisions with, and what they're using to make their decisions with is not the best information. It is not the most predictive information. So he comes down pretty hard in this video, which I'm looking at the bottom. He comes down hard on the credit score. Now, 2022, we're talking about the social credit score because we live in a tragedy. I'm kidding. I think we live in a comedy, but in 2018, he was very critical of regular credit scores. So as we move forward, as people even discuss social credit scores, which used to be a conspiracy theory, now they're just inching their way to the mainstream. Let's keep that in mind, that these things are not transparent and that the AI does not make better predictions than regular old people. Now, after all of that, what I hope you got out of this video, the most important thing that I hope you learned from this video, is that you can now better explain this meme. This meme is a fantastic heuristic to deciding what is going on in our society. Somebody put Professor Geigerenzer at the far end. I'm kidding. I played too much. You know that. Anyway, what do you think? Do you trust your gut, or has it been hijacked by advertisers? Did you learn anything in this video that might help you make better predictions in your future? Let me know. Subscribe.